Welcome into another episode of the Inside Bassmaster Podcast. I'm your host today, Ronnie Moore, and I'm joined by my host, my co-host as well, Kyle Jessie. Kyle, what's going on, man?
Not much, dude. Just got back into town late last night or early this morning, depends on how you look at it. But just got back from the Harris chain, and classic prep starts now.
Well, I'm a little jealous. I was in Arkansas this whole time during the live show, obviously indoors. And so I look like a ghost compared to you. You got some sun, and I'm very jealous about that. That's actually, the Harris chain is not far from where I grew up. I grew up right dead center in between the St. Johns River and the Harris chain. If you kind of go and make I guess if you go east and then north, instead of just cutting straight across diagonally, you would have hit where I grew up. My mom grew up in Mount Dora, Florida. My parents live on Lake Eustis, actually, on the Harris chain. And so the Harris chain is something special to me. And man, it was a really good event, but it was just a different event. Not going to say a letdown, but man, we had high expectations for the Harris chain with how it's been fishing and what the St. John's did coming into the week of weather. Man, I thought it was going to be wide open for the Harris chain for the second stop of the Elite Series.
Yeah, no, we talked about it last week. In between the St. John's and the Harris chain tournament, I'll just go ahead and call us out. We were predicting 100 plus pounds.
No, I was. Just say what you said in the text message to me last night.
I texted Ronnie last night when I was on the way home, and I told him, you were only 40 pounds off of your winning weight prediction. That's not that bad.
Only 40 pounds. I said we're going to break 100, and I said it's going to be emphatic, and I said 118, and man, about day one, I knew we ain't going to get 118. That's for sure, boy.
Yeah, no, I was right there with you. I said I wanted to play the reverse psychology game and say that it wasn't going to take 100 pounds. But in my heart, I definitely thought it was going to take over 100 pounds. So I'm right there with you. I was certainly a little surprised.
I'll say your reverse psychology did not work out on getting the 100 because you picked 90 something. I think the Harris chain knew not enough people chose 100. So it just did not live up to 100, but 77 pounds, 11 ounces took the title. And that was Buddy Gross of Chattanooga, Tennessee. That is, he lives right there, not far from the banks of Lake Chickamauga. Obviously he's the Elite Series pro with Chickamauga on the side of his boat. So I will say a lot of people, he had a 5% pick rate in Rapala Bassmaster Fantasy Fishing. And that was most likely because a lot of people are keeping their eye on him for later events, that he's definitely an offshore guy. And not saying people didn't think offshore was going to happen, because Harris chain, honestly, is one of the best lakes in the state of Florida for offshore fishing. But man, it was trending towards a shallow water derby. We've got Chickamauga coming up in the future. So I know his mercury drain the lake percentage for fantasy fishing was way low as well, because people are saving him for that event. So kind of came out of nowhere a little bit, but he was the day 2 leader. He broke about 20 pounds a day average. He had 22 and change, and then 17 and change, got 40 pounds. Only person to do that, on pace for 80 for the event. Came up a little short of that, but we saw a lot of different looks. And I know you got to cover a different aspect of this event that we hadn't seen in past Elite Series events, and we hadn't really seen factor in a lot of Bassmaster tournaments here. And that was Lake Apopka. You got to be around that Beau Claire, the Beau Claire Apopka Canal, and then obviously Apopka itself. What was it like? Is that a different world down there compared to Lake Harris and Eustis?
It seems like it. I never said this anywhere, but for anybody that's ever watched Interstellar, the movie, it was basically like the scene where they show up on the planet that is just water, and it's water as far as you can see, and you can't see anything else. That's basically what it was like putting into Lake Apopka. You look at it on the map and you're deceived. You think it's not that big. And then you run across from the south side, I guess, to the north side. And it takes you forever and a day just to get over there. Yeah. Really was interesting. I was extremely excited to get that assignment, because in the previous 2 tournaments I've covered on the Harris chain, 2 college events, Apopka didn't really play as much, really didn't play at all, to be honest. So when Steve Bowman told me that's where I was going to go, I immediately texted him back and said, are we sure that there's even going to be enough anglers there to cover? And of course, I'm sitting there at the lock, and I think day 1, me and you were talking about it. It was like 22 anglers, or maybe even more than that at some point, ended up in Apopka. So it really was interesting. Definitely a target rich environment, starting to grow some grass back. My boater was telling me about, in past years, the grass had died off, the water had gotten dirty. some issues with some parasites and different things of that nature. But Apopka is coming back strong. Ronnie and I talked about it before the tournament. They're making a real initiative to let the grass grow back and try to get it back to the way it was once before. So that was really interesting to see that. And I definitely think it's going to factor in the long term.
Yeah. And I will say, a lot of people want to chime in with their 2 cents when it comes to conservation and how states grow and protect lakes, or the initiatives. Everybody wants to compare themselves to Texas Parks and Wildlife, and Texas is a huge fishing state. So is Florida, but Florida is definitely in a different realm because of their low elevation. Just like Louisiana, they do often have a lot of other factors that isn't just fishing related when it comes to water quality. And so, yeah, Lake Apopka for years, they didn't have it a part of the Harris chain technically for locking. They considered Lake Yale more a part of the Harris chain than that one. And you can't even get to Yale through the Harris chain. Like Tommy was mentioning it, and it is technically part of the Harris chain, but you'd have to have a mini John Cox boat. Like you'd have to have a mini version of his mini boat to get through a culvert to even get over to Lake Yale. So that's why we had the Site One event on Saturday over there, because that you can't, it's not a part of the playing field. But Apopka was treated like that, and a lot of it was farms and field runoff, fertilization, whatever you want to say, running off into Apopka, changing the water, pollution rate, really hurting the grass. The bass weren't there necessarily as strong as they had been. And so Florida Wildlife Conservation, FWC, has actually made a plan to protect Apopka and to bring it back to what it used to be and what it can be. That is the one thing about this place, is that it is kind of the X factor lake when it comes to being different than the rest. And so if they're letting that hydrilla get almost topped out, that water clarity is only going to get better. It's got a lot of different reeds and shoreline grass. We really got to see, when I saw Clifford Perch catch that 10-pounder, or 913 as it ended up being, I thought he might have been in Apopka because how target rich his environment was, but he was in another kind of protected area in Griffin. And so Apopka was very cool. Tell me real quick before we get into the winning baits and details of Buddy Gross dominating this event offshore and whatnot. Tell me a little bit about that lock situation, because we often hear locking and it's a risk reward thing, trapping yourself out, not being able to get back. Some guys late. We know that the Pickwick and the Wilson lock system, those are bigger ones because they have huge barges that do waterways for shipping and whatnot. This is not a lock that is shipping. This is purely water management from one lake to another. And it was very interesting how it played out.
Yeah, it really was. On day one, like I said, I think it surprised everybody, not just myself, but even the anglers. The majority of the anglers I talked to on the water, one, they were really surprised by how many anglers decided to go to Apopka. And two, they were all surprised by how much of a mess it was getting to Apopka through the lock. By my best judgment, I think they were letting 3 anglers through the lock at a time. So you're talking about ultimately at one time, there was 15 plus guys waiting to get through the lock.
7 lock systems. Yeah.
Right. So you're having to wait there for a long time. And one of the first anglers I talked to about this was Scott Martin, who, ended up getting to Apopka later on day one based on that. Exactly. He was one of the later boats. I want to say somewhere in the 80s, I think you told me.
84 it on day one.
Yeah. So it took him a while just to get through the lock. And as an angler, as you're sitting there just waiting and waiting and waiting, obviously that internal clock in your head starts ticking, and you're thinking to yourself, I'm wasting a lot of time here. And I think on day 2, there were certainly less boats in Apopka. It wasn't a ton less, but I think, there were some anglers that probably made the decision not to do that, because it was definitely more difficult to lock to Apopka than I think some of them might have expected.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's kind of like, if you're not going to be in the first flight, I'd rather be boat 94, because with Scott Martin, we see him pitching a spinning rod around trying to, catch some fish in the canal, because the canal is actually pretty good for fishing. Sure. But if you go and get away from the boats at the lock, because why are you going to bunch up real close? Well, he's got 2 or 3 boats behind him. So if he gets out of line to just go fishing for an hour while he waits, he's going to be passed by 2 more. And so if you're the last man in the canal to get, that's great. I'll just stop at the bridge. I'm going to fish back here, guys. You guys hang out. I'm going to spend an hour fishing. And so it ended up not getting one there. It ended up getting one probably about as close to takeoff as you can. And that was by Mr. Buddy Gross. And we're going to go ahead. I'm just going to go ahead and bring him in here. We get to talk with the champ himself about how he won the Harris chain. And it was probably a little bit of a shock to him. So we'll get his instant reaction on that. It's been basic when we're recording this podcast, it's been about 24 hours since he took home the title there. Buddy, can you hear us?
I got you now.
You look like you're kicked back, laid back. I don't know if that's the look you get when you cash $100,000 check or not, but you look real comfortable.
I just got real comfortable. It's been a long day. I was going to go fish another tournament, and I had a lot of opportunities to try to talk to you guys, and I just decided to back out, come home, and get it all ready to go to the Classic.
Well, buddy, obviously we've been talking about your win, not anything specific to you yet. We were talking about the Apopka factor. I wanted to start off and say congratulations on your win, 77-11 to get it done. A great final day. We basically said on Bassmaster Live, whoever caught the biggest bag on the final day was going to win because everyone was within 5 pounds. You ended up not only taking the win, but the biggest bag as well. And you did so just Buddy Gross style, fishing offshore. Did you even give the shallow water sight fishing or flipping Kissimmee grass? Did you even give it a run throughout practice, or did you strictly spend time graphing, looking for those offshore little spots?
I kept graphing, looking for the offshore spots, but I kept looking for it in the grass, and I just never could really get on something that I thought was great. I know it was there, and I know some guys that were catching them in some holes and stuff, but I never found the right one. So when I abandoned that ship, I come back to Harris. I had been to Harris Chain a couple of times, and I had locked off of Harris and went to Griffin, and I'd been over to some of the other lakes and come back the last hour and fish on Harris and cull everything I had. They live on Harris. You just got to find them. And now that the grass is gone, it's a lot harder. And I just went over there and found some stuff that I wound up having on my own. It was really nice.
So, buddy, you talked about it a lot during weigh-in and then after the weigh-in. We got the chance to talk to you right before you left. I'm actually surprised he's going to talk to me at all because I think he wanted to kill me yesterday for making him stay in the parking lot for so much longer. You talked about having a tough practice, not really finding those areas. What gave you the confidence to still fish that way? Was it the conditions, the way they set up? What was it that ultimately made you decide to stay on the offshore game?
Just the fact that when I did get a bite, it was quality. I didn't get a ton of bites. A couple of these days, I keep losing y'all. Y'all still there?
Yep, we got you.
I just got quality bites. When you start finding those quality bites, it's just something that's kind of bred into me. I like quality, and I just kept digging and trying to find more of it, and got better as it went along.
So, Buddy Griffin, it's funny that you say that because every time I've covered an open at the Harris chain, it's always that January, February time. And I always spend my, it's one of the most convenient boat ramps in the world from downtown Leesburg is the Griffin boat ramp. I'll put in there. And by the time I get up to the lock, they're coming through the lock. And I'm like, hey, here's all the guys. So Griffin, I think I've actually covered you. I think I've actually covered you in an open on Griffin, day one of an event. It used to be, and it still may be, I want to get your thoughts on this, one of the best offshore lakes in the Harris chain. I know it's got grass edges and different things like that, maybe some hard spots as well. But what did you see in Griffin this year that told you it's not even worth it to lock through? Because it's not an inconvenient lock. It's relatively quick, but
yeah,
to not even go and spend it in Harris.
The biggest thing I've heard from me was there's so much of it this year, and they had so many more places to hide. Where in years past when I was there was a lot of it, but there was nowhere near as much what there is now, and they didn't have as many places to hide. They kind of congregated up a little more. The schools would be bigger and the quality would be more gathered up, where I think this time they were able to spread out, and I just didn't have the time to spend. You're going to have to spend 4 or 5 days over there to find the school that you're going to need to beat these guys. The elite gamblers are so good at what they do, and when you got the bed fishermen and all that stuff, you better be on your A game. And honestly, in practice, I didn't think I had anything for them. I just showed up on the first day, and I really think I was on a shad spawn that moved, and that's why I caught them in a different place every day. So that's another thing that we don't get to talk about much. I always started on the same place, but I never caught them the same place in 4 days.
So, buddy, let's get into some bait talk. Obviously, I know people want to hear about that. I had the opportunity to talk to you, like I mentioned, after weigh-in yesterday, and you talked about the Carolina rig and how special that was to you being able to catch them on the Carolina rig. Kind of talk to us about that. Give everybody a little insight on that, because I thought that was really awesome.
My dad and I fished a lot together, and he was a dragger. If he couldn't flip grass, he wanted to be dragging a Carolina rig, and it was like, I mean, it was terrible. I mean, it was the worst thing ever for me. I didn't want to drag. I wanted to throw something. I want to throw a spinner bait, a crankbait, anything but a Carolina rig. But he force fed me a Carolina rig my whole life, and and I told him one time I'm never throwing it again, and I didn't want to. But I'll be honest with you, Josh Straskin was traveling with me, and he was getting some bites on the Carolina rig, and he said, "Buddy, I'm telling you, you make that last day, you better have it." And I had it tied on in the box the whole time, and the way those fish were set up on that last day, I picked that thing up and threw it out there because it was like 12 feet deep. And everything I had was really too light for that. So I threw it out there, and first cast I get a bite. Second cast I don't. I thought, well, that first one was just luck. So I was going to set it down. I said, one more time. And then it was like 5 casts in a row if you was watching the show, you know. So, but no, that Carolina rig has such a dear spot in my heart because it was what my dad loved to do. And we did it together a lot. And, to be honest with you, early in my career, that Carolina rig was a big part of it. But once I figured out a swim bait, I was pretty much done with it.
Yeah, and buddy, what's the difference in a football jig or a old monster worm or something on a Texas rig compared to the same type of baits you're gonna throw on a big Texas rig and you just rig it on a Carolina rig? I mean, I know bottom contact's better with a Carolina rig. You could probably fish it a little faster, but by the way that you fish, and you're not a dragger claimed, as you say, you're not, I mean, it doesn't even have time for that worm to maybe float up. It's going to be on the bottom right behind that weight with the way you like to fish. And so it wasn't just because you had it in the locker and it was deeper than you wanted it to be, or is there something to that Carolina rig in Florida? Because it seems like it is a money maker.
It is a money maker. And the biggest reason I chose Carolina rig the other day, we had a pretty good wind the other morning on the last day. That wind, you can maintain contact with your bait with a Carolina rig so much better in windy conditions than you can a Texas rig. Once the wind died down a little bit, if you noticed, I switched over to the Texas rig, but the Texas rig I think was coming off the bottom more for me because it only had a 1/4 ounce weight where the Carolina rig had a 3/4, and I think that kind of got me that bigger bite. I got one big bite on that Texas rig. And I just felt like I had a better hookup ratio with the Texas rig. I was missing a few with the Carolina rig, and they were hitting it and running. I mean, Texas rig, you can kind of feel that bite a little bit sooner to me. I don't know. It's just that's a feel thing for me. If I could throw a Texas rig, I'd rather have a Texas rig. But the Carolina rig catches them. It catches them up north. It catches them everywhere you go. It's kind of like a sink, though. The Carolina rig is going to catch fish if you throw it.
Kyle, I wanted to jump in and kind of piggyback off of that. You said maybe baits were very key, but you said in another interview on someone's social media, I saw the video of that you were talking about how you have your boat set up and that you won't go anywhere without your 360. And you're referring to your Humminbird 360 being able to see out the structure out in front of you. How key is that in Florida? Because most places aren't that deep. You said it was 12 feet deep. But what did you see on your 360 that lets you know this is a good spot? I think you said you saw fish, but what does it look? What does a good looking offshore spot to Buddy Gross look like in Florida? Because you kind of fished it backwards than you wanted to as well.
Well, the only reason I fished it backwards, I was up close to the Kissimmee grass on the shell bed, paralleling it, trying to cover as much of the water column. The productive part of the structure all week long was in that 5-6 foot range up on top of the hard spot. And I was up there and I was covering it very well. I was being very efficient, and I could see out in front of me, and I could see 9,500 feet with my 360. And the fish were, anytime those fish are on them hard spots, it shows up like a balloon. I mean, you see them plain as day. And I wasn't seeing anything. And I'm sitting there looking, I'm like, there's a white dot, there's a white dot. And that's what they look like on the 360. Well, all of a sudden there's 5 white dots. I just power poled down. I was like, that's fish, because I've seen them my whole life. Since I've been using it, I know what fish look like. I throw out there and I'm like, I throw out there with the lipless bait first. It goes to the bottom. I do my whole little working it all the way back thing, not a bite. I think I throwed it again, not a bite. And I picked up that Carolina and threw it out there, and it's like, oh my gosh, it's like it went in a pond that they couldn't escape from, and they eat it. I mean, it's less like, I don't understand it, but they liked it. I think I was maxing some, the hats out there. Maybe there's a few needlefish swimming through. I caught a few off of that deal, maybe, but I don't know. But those fish were traveling that break, but they weren't on top of it. They weren't even off the side. They weren't even on the break. They were off the break out there on the flat part of it, and they were just going back and forth. And I feel like they were just using that area to feed that day, and got so blessed to find them feeding, and we caught them.
So, buddy, a little bit off track of the tournament. Obviously, a super good start to the year to you or for you, sitting in 5th place in AOY right now. Some may not consider you off the top of their head to be a Florida angler per se, but we're about to start heading to some lakes that you're familiar with. One that you're really, really familiar with here, not too long. Just talk to us about how good it feels to get off to a good start this year with, like I said, some events I'm sure you're looking forward to.
Yeah, I'm that nervous guy though. I'm not the guy. Maybe I am the half full instead of or half empty instead of the half full. But Chickamauga's coming. I know. I love Pickwick. Pickwick's been one of the greatest lakes for me in my career too. And Santee Cooper. I mean, everything we've got this year, with the exception of the South Dakota, I'm looking forward to. St. Lawrence, I got a bone to pick with them smallmouth. I'm really wanting to do well on them things, and it's just, I don't know. I mean, I just feel like it's lined up for a good year for us. We just got to continue to work hard. You can't lay down and just think it's coming, because it ain't with this bunch. And these fisheries aren't give me. Chickamauga that time of year is as finicky as it comes. Pickwick, I'm sure it's going to be an offshore deal. Offshore stuff gets very crowded, so then you got to get creative when they start busting them things up. But the cool thing about it is the elites, we fished 94 boats where, I've always fished tournaments had 200 in it. So I get to find some places a little off the wall that I don't, it's a little easier, I guess. It's not easy, but
Sure.
It's not near as beat up when you got half the boats. So it's going to be a fun year. It really is.
Well, no pressure, buddy. But since 2019, the 3 AOY winners, Canterbury, Windlet, and Fighter, none of them have finished worse than 28th in the first 2 events. So you're off to a great start. That you're, that you're 5th in points, and that you've had 2 pretty dang good events in Florida. I feel really bad because I Skyped with you when we had that long COVID break before restarting the season in 2020, and I Skyped with you and said, how confident do you feel about Eufaula? And then you go out and win it. I didn't hype you up this time as a pick for Harris Chain, and you won it. So I thought it was me. I could control when you won, but you just proved that you're just that good. Tell me about your whole journey as quickly as you want, or with certain details, but tell me, I've heard it before a little bit, but for the folks of Bassmaster listen on the podcast and on YouTube and on the website, your move from around the house to regional to national to winning national events, and then jumping into the elite series and being a contender and a threat, it's happened honestly pretty quick. The amount of wins you have and the amount of years you've been professionally fishing, it's, you've jumped in midway events, not the top level for a long time now, but it's been, 6, 7 years, 8 years, maybe tops. And you've won almost that many events.
I think in 16 is the first year I qualified. Is that right?
16 is the first year you fished professionally.
Yeah, 16 is my first year I fished.
So this is year 7. Yeah.
Right. So I tried, I don't know. In 15, I just said, I want to go fish the coasters, and I want to just see if I could qualify for the tour. And the first year that I tried, I qualified, and didn't know if I was going to go fish professionally, but I wound up unemployed, to be honest with you. I had $5,000 in the bank and come home without a job, and asked my wife what we're going to do. She said, well, you just qualified to fish for a living, so I think you need to try it. So I said, yeah, we don't have the money to do that. And she said, well, we'll figure that part out. And we just live on faith. We trust the Lord to guide us. And we got together with some friends that had some small businesses, and a couple of them said, we're going to get you started into this deal. And we dove off in it. And long story short, we fished 5 events, and I got my first check on my 5th event. And that check give us enough money to go to the next one. And we went to the next one, and that was going to be our last one. And that was when I won Pickwick. And that $100,000 paid back everything that we had owed. And, we had a little bit of money left over to start the next year. Well, that one win got us some recognition locally, and some more people got on board with us. So we went for the next year. And, I think I won 2 events at FLW in 3 years, and I've won 2 events for you guys in 3 years. So, Lord just keeps opening doors, and we keep walking through them, but we live a lot by faith here at this house. And I don't know. It comes when I'm not expecting it. I do like Florida, but Florida is a very, very fickle place that can bite you so fast. And I knew that going in, and I was so worried about it. And I don't mean to be doom and gloom, but when somebody asks me how your practice is, and I tell you, I'm not catching them, I'm not catching them. If I'm catching them, you can see it on my face. I'll have a smile. I can't play poker well because everybody knows what I got. If I got aces, everybody in the room knows. So, I just didn't have a good practice, and they showed up. But when I get the opportunity and I smell a little bit and I figure a little bit out, I put two and two together good. My math's really good, and we've been fortunate enough to do that all along. So it's just been a good experience, and got very blessed. The first year I fished the Opens, qualified for the elites. I'd hate to know I had to go back and do it again, but I fished the first Open this year down in Toho, Kissimmee, or not? Is it Kissimmee? Yeah.
Yep.
And we got to check there. So I mean, it's been a good February so far. So I can't wait to get March started.
Yeah, there's something to be said that for consistency in Florida, or some type of consistency, there's always an outlier. I was talking about on the show how Brandon Lester's last 10 events in the state of Florida, whether they're Opens or elites, and it's on 4 different bodies of water. He hasn't finished worse than 35th. That to me is mind blowing. And he's a Tennessee boy too. So maybe it's just in the water down there south of Knoxville where you guys are. But Buddy, you obviously talked about the season upcoming and whatnot, but how long do you guys enjoy this? Because I mean, you're Buddy Gross now. You know that you only had 5,000 in your account when you started this. Do you ever just look at the bank and you're like, man, I'm good. I'm really good at this fishing thing. And that's, I wouldn't want to be doing anything else. Do you ever just sit back and reflect on that before the next event? Like, you know what, Leanne, we're doing mighty fine.
Well, we've been blessed enough. We bought us a piece of property and we built us a nice little house here. And unfortunately, my daughter's got into this barrel racing, so it takes all the money out extra. But she is the talent my daughter has for this barrel racing. I'm trying to keep her in good enough stock that she has an opportunity, because the raw talent she has, I am so impressed. Her mother, I've rode horses, but the horses I rode nags, but we weren't horse people. And I'm telling you right now, my daughter sparked something. She's got all kinds of horse in her. So, but we are blessed. But we put a lot of it back into her and this place we have. But time to time, I need those wins like that to recoup some of this that we do around here. But Lord's, like I said, Lord's blessing us, and we have a good life together.
Well, about 3/4 of a year ago, I realized that you weren't a horse rider because you couldn't stay on one and you got hurt before the classic. And so Kyle, I mean, he's not, this Buddy Gross's first classic was the year, he's hurt, he's banged up, and probably not the finish that he'd wanted. But going into this one, Kyle, he's probably got some good momentum.
I would think so. I mean, I would hope you get, a little bit of time to enjoy this win. But like Ronnie said, there's a big tournament coming up. Give us some of your thoughts on the classic. Yeah, no kidding. Quick turnaround. Give us some of your thoughts on the classic. Do you have time to pre-practice? Did you even want to pre-practice? Just kind of give us some of your thoughts. A week and a half away from, well, actually less than that from practice for you.
No, I did go over for a few days. I've been there one other time in FLW. My rookie year, we went there. That's the only time I've been there. So I did go look around. I'm just hoping for warm weather, as long as I don't want to have to chase the spots and ditches. They're going to catch them out there without a doubt in my mind, but I'm probably going to be the guy up looking for largemouth just to stay in my comfort zone and try to make a run at it that way. I'm not saying I'm not going to catch spots, but I'm not going to do it the typical way, I hope. But every time I get a preconceived notions on the tournament, it is the furthest thing from what happens that you can imagine. So I'm probably going to be in ditches chasing herring more than likely.
So blank slate, no preconceived notions. Tell the fans listening in how Buddy Gross approaches the first hour of practice on Friday, unofficial practice Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Then you have official practice on that Wednesday before we kick it off, a couple days later for the actual classic. Friday of unofficial practice, the first time you dunk that boat in the water at Lake Hartwell. What are you going to do for your first hour? Like, how do you even think about approaching a tournament that starts 1 week from then?
I am going to be looking at water temperature, and then I'm going to start looking at the weather, and I'm going to look at which way the wind's coming from, what kind of mornings we've got, and kind of let that dictate what part of the lake I'm going to instead of where I want to go, and try to run with it that way. I'm going to let water temperature, weather, and even cloud cover tell me what we're going to be doing. And I'm going to try to fish ahead of the fish, if that makes sense. I'm going to try not to fish what's biting at the moment, but what I think may be biting when the tournament comes, because we are going to have cold weather whenever we get there, but we're going to have really warm weather when the tournament starts, and I'm going to be trying to anticipate that.
Awesome. Kyle, you got anything else for Buddy?
I think that just about does it. Once again, it seems like it was less than 24 hours ago I was telling you congrats, but congratulations again, buddy.
Thank you very much. And guys, I'm glad to be part of Bass, and you guys are some of that thing that makes it so special for us all.
Well, we appreciate it, buddy. Congratulations. You are the 36th person in the world to ever win more than one Elite Series event. So congratulations on that. He becomes the 36th. Him and John Cruz, we went from 34 anglers who had won more than one Elite event, jumped up 2 in the first 2 events of the season. Buddy Gross, we appreciate you joining us. 77-11 at the Harris Chain, and he gets the win for the second event. Kyle, as we let Buddy go here, I mean, any other thoughts? See you, buddy. Any other thoughts that you have about his win? I mean, it was a very, very dominant final day for him, to the way he caught him.
No, absolutely. That was the thing you and I had talked about so much before the tournament was, we were no different than the majority in thinking that it was going to be dominated by bedfish. Full moon, warm weather. I can tell you, because I was down there, it was really warm for 3 days straight with a full moon before that tournament. And, I would have expected no way that it would be one offshore or fishing the way he did. However, I will say that, like you mentioned, the Harris Chain is a fantastic offshore lake. So you take a offshore guy like Buddy, and looking back in hindsight, it's not hard to believe that he was able to figure it out. But nonetheless, still shocking, that the bedfish didn't play more. It's not to say they didn't play, but that it wasn't one on bedfish. It's really, really impressive, and it's a testament to how good Buddy is at doing what he does, because he was going against some of the Goliaths of sight fishing on that final day, and he came out on top.
Yeah, and he had a deficit too. We saw a wire-to-wire win from John Cruz the week prior with a huge comeback attempt by a guy down in 7th, 8th, 9th place like Bob Downey with a huge bag. And then Buddy Gross starting the day in 6th place, Drew Benton starting the day in 8th place, I believe. And those two end up jumping up and making a charge at the win. And like you said, yeah, it's not a shock with it being an offshore derby that Buddy Gross got the victory. That's definitely in his realm of ability and capability. But I will say that in the whole scope of how that event played out, did not play out like I thought it would. I really thought with a full moon the Wednesday before the tournament starts, so the it's going into a full moon and the first few days are off of the full moon. I had one of my good friends, Garrett Rockamora, tell me that the fish in Florida, they like full moons, but everywhere else in the country, when it gets to that water temperature, full moon is the trigger for a lot of these states and a lot of these lakes. But in Florida, the spawn is from November to May. There are fish that could be on bed in as early as Thanksgiving and as late as Memorial Day or Mother's Day. And so for those fish, a full moon's probably not as impactful. And that wasn't even in my thought process. Garrett mentioned that the new moon is really what puts a whole big wave. The full moon will have some fish popping up here and there. And it seemed like, man, Saturday and Sunday, if that was day 1 and 2 of the event, it would have played out exactly like we thought. Monday, Tuesday with sight fish dominating. But I will say kudos to the guys who had nothing in practice. They had one spot and it ended up being Party Cove, the Long Island boys. They're just trying to make it, in that area, and Banana Cove, all those guys. What an incredible spot. What an incredible area. And the recipe was that hydrilla.
Yeah, no, I got to spend day 3 in that area. And after hearing Andy Crawford and Shane Durant's tell me about how many boats were in there, I underestimated it big time, because when we got in there, even on day 3 with, the field being 47, it was, like you said, it was over half the field was in there. Kind of made it tricky because you didn't want to get in anybody's way. But then I was covering Jake Whitaker, and I was trying to ask him where he wants me to go. And he looks at me and he goes, dude, you can go anywhere, because we've been everywhere in this whole area. And that's the truth. I mean, they all got along really well. I mean, they worked together, as well as you could have. But yeah, I mean, that whole area, one of the few places on the chain that, still has a lot of hydrilla. And to see it maintain, or, see some of those guys maintain those weights for 4 days straight, with so much pressure in that area, really speaks volumes to how good the area is. Because how many times have we seen, a situation similar to that, and it just completely fizzle out by day 4, or even day 3 sometimes. So it was really impressive that area is that good. And then 2, that many guys were able to make it work.
Yeah, and I bet you a couple guys were launching that day 1, and they're like, "God, I hope I catch 5 from this flat of grass. I don't know what I have." And then by day 2, they're like, "Man, if I had this to myself, I'd win the event by 100 pounds." It was very incredible. And I will say that grass flat was great because it was one of the only areas on Harris that has a good amount of hydrilla. Hydrilla everywhere, and you can reel whatever you want around it. Obviously, pre-spawn, post-spawn, during the spawn, it's just a great funnel and a great highway for fish. It's in a protected area between the bank and an island, so any wind direction, really, unless it's like a south, or a northwest wind, that northwest or a southeast that comes up straight up the gap, it's going to be for the most part protected. But the one X factor that started to develop on day 2, it seemed, was a shad spawn. And I don't know if that's what kept fish around. Normally, when you pressure fish with 30 boats, 35 boats in an area over grass flat, for one, you're hoping there's still grass left on day 2 with how much grass you're ripping up every time you're bringing your baits through there. And it's just floating on the surface, or it's on your baits when you're reeling it. But to keep the bass there, it had to be the shad spawn. They knew this is my feeding highway before I go spawn, or I just got done, and this is my best place to feed back up.
No, and that was the thing, is when I heard that for the first time, I was a little surprised, because I didn't even consider the shad spawn to be a factor. But when we got in there, you kind of saw some of the signs of a shad spawn. Obviously, it's not as easy to see visually as if they're spawning up in the
riprap or
shore grass or a dock or anywhere where they're flickering, that kind of thing. But there was a little bit of surface activity. Some of those guys did utilize a topwater. Not that was a huge player, but seeing the signs on day 3, it was really pretty crazy to see, because I did not expect that to be the case. But like you said, I think that had to be one of the big reasons those fish were in there. Otherwise, like you said, it would have probably shut the bite off completely. But the fact that every morning guys were able to go in there and catch them quick, for the most part, pretty much is all you need to know. And that's shad spawn 101.
Yeah, and whether it was a quick limit and they get out of there, or it was the first bite of the day is an 8-pounder like Brian Schmidt on day 3, that was half his bag. That was half his bag. Mm-hmm. And he snuck into the top 10 and 10th, and then he moved up from there because he had a decent day on the final day. And so it was a very interesting event. I was a little disappointed. I really thought that Eustis was going to factor. If it's not sight fishing, the offshore grass in Eustis that I once knew, I don't know if it's not there anymore for various reasons or what, but we saw quite a few people early in the event at Dora and Beauclair in that general region. Day 3, there was like 5 people or less in those 2 lakes. The amount of people in Apopka significantly dropped because of the lock situation. And it's nobody's fault with the lock. It's just a smaller lock and more people than expected. Griffin, though, it started to show out. We saw Gerald Swindle on day 1 catch a lot of fish in Griffin, go back and not even make the cut. He was sitting in a good spot, comes back the next day, does not nearly produce, and then misses the cut in the 50s. And he was one who was we got on live on day 1, we had 6 anglers, and I think we had 6 different regions represented. It was very, very cool the way it was picked out. And I will compliment me and Z. We picked those lists and try to get storylines and coverage and who might catch them, who's a local favorite. 4 of the 6 day 1 cameras made it to the final day. Lester, Cox, Martin, Benton all made it and did it for various reasons. And so very, very interesting. Griffin did start to show up at the end of the event with David Mullins. Drew Benton was sight fishing in there. Clifford Perch was up in the marsh areas. And so what a diverse event. Harris, though, like Buddy Gross said, they've got him there. And it's because time in and time out, they have tournaments at Venetian Gardens, and it does get repopulated every single week. You take them from other lakes, you put them here. It takes them a little while to get back. Maybe they stop in and hang out on a shell bar or a grass flat, and they make it their home. But we didn't see much from Little Lake Harris. That's normally a little bit of a factor, not much there. So overall though, what was your takeaway from the Harris chain? You've been there now a couple different times in the fall, in January, in February, when the sight fishing is about to kick on, or you get to see a little bit of it.
No, just very diverse, I think is the one thing that sticks out to me, over the course of 3 times being there, is the fact that a lot of times Florida fishing, at least in my opinion, seems like it's not all that diverse. I mean, a lot of guys are doing the same thing, but it was really cool to see, like you said, so many lakes factor over the course of the tournament, and fishing in different ways, fishing offshore grass, fishing for spawning fish, fishing in canals on docks. Really way more diverse than you would expect for a Florida tournament where the fish, theoretically could be spawning. So, I mean, my general takeaway is that the fishery itself is really incredible. Just because the weights weren't as high as we might have expected, that doesn't take away from it. It's just, probably more the case that it was transitioning, right? I mean, you've got fish doing a lot of different things and not a lot of fish doing one thing. But no, I was really impressed with the event, and it was really fun to see up close. And I'm really looking forward to getting to go back and watch more of the live footage, because being on the water, I don't get to watch it as much, but I'm interested to see what some of the guys I didn't get to see on the water were doing.
There was definitely some really great action and some really, lulls in their day trying to figure out what to do. One thing I kept an eye on the Bass Track map, that Dora shell bar that was made so popular in so many events in January, and by the college series with the records that were set there, and with every single local event for the next 3 weeks after that. I never saw you were on the water. I don't know if you went and peeked. I barely, maybe I think they were in the canal and they were actually on the shell bar. I don't know, because it's not far from the mouth. I didn't see anybody on that. And people were perusing your gallery, looking at the photos in the background. What's around here? I know where that's at, and which is totally legal to go try it. And that just shows you, even though Florida's so shallow, that they use a shell bar pre-spawn, post-spawn. I guarantee you some fish probably spawn on shell bars as well. That nobody was there. That it's not like it's a place that's only plays this time of year. It's a place that will hold fish. And so that was very interesting to me as well. My dad got to be a camera boat for the last 2 events, so that was cool. He got to enjoy that. I'll probably talk to him quite a bit this week as he tells me what he saw. And I saw him in some blogs get referred to as a Harris chain expert. We'll have to talk about that, because I don't know necessarily how much of an expert he is, but I'll have to bust him on that. So, Kyle, though, I do want to transition the conversation before we hit the Classic preview a little bit. We're gonna have another podcast before the week of the Classic starts, or before the event starts. But let's talk about Angler of the Year. We're 2 events in. 9 events in the season, so we're basically 25% through the season almost. We've got David Mullins in first, 193 points. That is incredible for one, because you can only get, I think, 100 points per event. So he's missed out on 7 total points in 2 events. Very, very good start. John Cox, 2 points behind him in second. Micah Frazier, another 14 or another 12 behind Cox. Blaylock's 14 behind Cox. 2 behind Frazier, and then Buddy Gross obviously 5th. I'll run it down the rest of them. 193 is the top points right now for AOY. 6th is Jamie Hartman. 7th, Jake Whitaker. 8th, Brandon Lester. 9th, Scott Canterbury. 10th, Ray Hanselman. And they're roughly 34 points behind. 10th place is 34 behind Mullins. So still pretty tight. But what is your takeaway after the first 2 events when it comes to maybe looking at one of those 10 being our AOY this year?
It's hard to predict. You obviously know that. It's a hard thing to do. But I mean, you talk to a guy like Buddy Gross, and you hear how excited he is for some of these upcoming events. But it's hard to root against somebody like that to finish the season out strong. And I say finish out the season. We're only 2 events in, but and another couple takeaways. Guys like Stetson Blaylock, Micah Frazier, super consistent. Have always been that. Micah had a really tough year last year. My fantasy team saw that firsthand several times.
I think he gave his mojo to his brother to get his brother off to a good start. I think he just did that. That was really nice of him.
So, those guys obviously room together, super good buddies. I wouldn't be surprised to see them keep the momentum going. But then again, David Mullins was it 2019, I guess, was the year that he became, came so close to winning AOY. 2020. Okay. So, I mean, for him to get off to that good of a start in Florida, it's really hard to overlook David Mullins. And then, John Cox also, I mean, on places like Chickamauga and some of these lakes we're going to, I'd say it'll set up just fine for him as well. So really anybody in the top 5, anybody in the top 10 right now. I mean, they're all super consistent anglers. You can't look at one specific angler in the top 10 and say, well, they're just a Florida guy. That's the only place that they're going to shine. These are guys that are super good all over the country. So that'll be interesting to keep an eye on.
Yeah, there have definitely been some bounce backs this year already from guys who didn't catch them, that when you look at the AOI list, you're like, these guys are all great. And then you look at them and half of them missed the Classic this past season because it's that competitive. They had a little bit of a slip up, something happened, didn't catch them as good. But looking at it, Micah Frazier, like you said, missed the Classic. Jamie Hartman, uncharacteristic. He was asking Dave Mercer to stop calling him Jamie the Hammer Hartman because he wasn't catching him. Now he can claim that he's 6th in AOI. Jake Whitaker checks in with the wrong flight at Pickwick, gets DQ'd his weight, misses the Classic by 50 points or so. And that was the difference in him checking in on time and not on time. He really is probably hating that, him and Frazier, because they love Hartwell. Then you look at Scott Canterbury missing the Classic. Very, very interesting there. Then we go below that list, though. 11th is Tyler Rivette. Good to see him get off to a good start in Florida. He's fishing his first Classic next week. Last man in the Classic there. And for him to maybe be able to go back to back as a young angler from the college series, getting his groove, getting into a groove, really listening maybe to his mentors with Brock and Hank Cherry, and really starting to feel himself out as an angler. You look at Clifford Perch, really tough season last year and last few years. He was one of the guys. I mean, I'm taking $100,000 to the gambling station and saying Clifford Perch is going to make the Classic every year. And so the last 2 years I'd have been broke because he did not. So Clifford Perch 14th there. I will say huge move on day 3 at Harris Chain by Jay Shakurit, rookie on the Bassmaster Elite Series. And man, I'm not saying it's 2 events in. He could bomb the rest of the season and this could have been a flash in the pan. Who knows? He did a bunch of work though. That day 3, when you have 47 anglers, 47 can't gain points, 47 can gain points. He snuck into that last spot in 47th, got to fish day 3, jumped all the way up into the top 15 of that event. Huge 22 pounds on the day 3, gained about 34 to 35 points doing so. And that gave him a pretty good margin, almost a 40-point margin now in Rookie of the Year lead. He's got about a 57-point margin over 3rd. And then you look down the list, I mean, he's got a 124-point margin after 2 events over the last place in Rookie of the Year, 10th place. So huge shout out to Jay Shakurit for that. That'll be an interesting race. Seeing the names there, Jay Shakurit, Masayuki Matsushita, Joseph Webster, Jonathan Kelly, and Cody Huff right there in the top 5. Very interesting group there that we'll keep an eye on. So a little bit of AOI. Can I get an AOI pick out of this 10? I'll say it one more time. Mullins, Cox, Frazier, Blaylock, Gross, Hartman, Whitaker, Lester, Canterbury, Hanselman. If you had to pick one for AOI, who do you think with the schedule coming up?
I'm going to go with Stetson Blaylock.
Me too.
I'm going to go Stetson Blaylock. I think for him to have such a good start in Florida, I mean, tell me what Stetson Blaylock's weakness is. He's one of those guys where you can't really put a pin on his giant weakness. And like I said, to get off to that good of a start in Florida, I think it's going to be a big thing for him. If I want to be different, and maybe I'm just thinking this because we talked to him, it seems like Buddy Gross is definitely going to be a huge factor. Obviously, Buddy Gross mentioned it. One of the X factors of this season really is going to be a Wahi tournament, because I mean, that's going to I guarantee you that will make or break some guys' AOY's chances.
There's like 30 anglers tops, maybe 25 anglers on the Elite Series who were here in 2018 to fish Lake Oahe. And so, yeah, there's not I said, I was going to ask Buddy before he got off. I heard rumor mill that you're going to go ahead when you're leading AOY or you're in contention through Pickwick, and we just have 3 events left, that you're going to spend 3 weeks at Oahe graphing before the off limits, the entire place, which is the 4th largest reservoir in the United States. And that's, the Great Lakes aren't reservoirs. This is the 4th biggest lake. It is massive. And so, and I mentioned it, really, Oahe is the unknown X factor lake, but Mississippi River, you can go catch yourself 13.5, 14 pounds a day and lose AOY because that is what everyone's catching. And to catch 15 pounds a day puts you in the cut or puts you above, and I don't know how it'll be fishing soon, but yeah, for John Cox, he's going to catch them shallow. He always catches them shallow everywhere, but we may, if we don't have a spawning event at Santee, we may not have a spawning event at Chick. Then we've got a month off and we're at Fork and Pickwick. They're going to be off beds there, and so his really prime time might have been Sunday and Saturday at the Harris Chain. That might, or Hartwell, who knows? Speaking of Hartwell, I wanted to get a little bit, not fantasy picks. We're going to do that in the next episode, but I wanted to get a little bit of a preview, a little bit of flavor, your thoughts on that. Talk to some good buddies, Stephen Burris and Hunter Hill. Hunter fished for Appalachian State when I was in school there. He lives not far from Hartwell. Those two guys fish there quite a bit. Said the water temperature, and this is Monday, February 21st. So we're about 4 days from practice starting. We're about, I guess, 9 days from the start of the elite or start of the classic. Water temp is 55 to 56 at Lake Hartwell. Blew my mind. I thought it would be 48 to 49 degrees and it would be warming, rising up, but weather looks decently solid. The lows each night are 35 to 45, somewhere in that range. The highs are in the 60s, and one day it peaks up into the 70s, I believe. So this might be a shallow water derby, Kyle.
Now, and you and I have talked about this a lot, off air, off camera. I always want an event to be diverse. I want there to be different things going on. Everybody knows how good Hartwell can be chasing the herring, chasing the, fishing the ditches, like Buddy mentioned, fishing for spots more or less specifically. You look back at the 2000, I guess it would have been 18 classic. Yeah. 2018 classic. Jason Christie fishing the chatterbait, doing the kind of things that me personally gets me really excited. I just wanted there to be a potential for that to happen. And like you said, at that water temperature, barring some massive change in the weather, it seems like there's plenty of guys that can figure that deal out, which is going to make for a really, really interesting tournament, regardless the way it plays out.
A little bit of stain in the creeks. There's some rain in the forecast throughout the next 10 days or so. If you look at the 10-day, percentages are low certain days, but we know how that passes through certain regions. So when you're thinking about the Seneca, you're thinking about the Tougaloo, you're thinking about the bottom end of the lake, there could be some color in the backs of those pockets. May not be much dog fennel because the water hasn't been super low lately like it was going into the elite in April of last year, which is a weird structure, but it's a structure that fish will get around and be comfortable. We may not have that and didn't play in the 2018 Classic other than maybe a little bit on day one for Brandon Polinick, but I will say we could really see it turn into over 3 days into a big time power fishing derb. And one thing I'll say is that the spotted bass fishermen who want to catch them in the ditches and offshore, you can still do that. It's going to be very diverse. But that herring spawn, not the herring spawn, but that morning, that bite that forms from the herring pushing into the backs of the ditches. And if people don't know the way Lake Hartwell sets up, all of these, if you look at the map, there are a bazillion. I don't even know if that's a number, how many commas that is, but there are a bazillion creeks and pockets on this place. And most of them will have some formation of a ditch that runs in the back of them, the creek channel that funnels to the back of it. And at a certain point, that creek channel, if I'm at the main lake right here and I'm looking towards the back of the pocket, that creek channel is going to twist and wind. And when it gets to the back, it's going to almost create like a wall, almost like a swimming pool when you're in the deep end and you're swimming on the bottom, and it's going to just hit that wall and you're going to go up. It does that and dumps into the back of the pocket. So those herring get pushed up against that somewhat wall in the evenings, and the bass just use it as ambush points, especially in the light when the sun starts to come over those trees. That kind of will make those herring start to push back out, and some of those bass will follow them out. Some of those bass will slide up to those docks outside the ditch and live there the rest of the day. But that bite should still be there. Kyle, I will say, can Brandon Cobb win it? There's two guys that the big question, I'll say this, there's three guys. Jason Christie, can he redeem himself? Can he win? He was one bite from doing it on that final day of the Classic. Can Hank Cherry three-peat? be the first person to ever do that. He'll be the third person ever to have more than 2 classics. And can Brandon Cobb win on his home body of water? Such a great track record there. Can he win? Because it's much different than a 4-day elite.
No, you're exactly right. There's no, and normally there isn't, but there's no lack of storylines for this Bassmaster Classic. Starting with the Brandon Cobb thing, I think he absolutely has a chance because he's another one of those anglers that we talk about all the time that's so versatile, can do so many different things. So I mean, you have to think somebody like him that has so much knowledge of this body of water has done so well here. Obviously, won an Elite Series tournament, a couple of years back. He'll be able to make those adjustments, maybe earlier than some of the other guys, just purely based on his knowledge of the body of water. I think that you can't rule him out. Obviously, he's a favorite for a reason. I think it's certainly possible he can do that. As far as Jason Christie goes, if the conditions are what you're saying they are, then and it stays like that, you'd have to think he'll be a factor. Absolutely. Kind of even the same with a Greg Hackney. Obviously, these guys are so, motivated to win a classic. I'm not saying that just because you're motivated to win a classic, you're going to do it. Obviously, everybody's motivated to win. But if the conditions set up for that style of tournament, you'd have to like their chances. And then, on the Hank Cherry thing, you go back-to-back classics and you think, well, there's no way he's going to win 3 in a row. But then you go to a lake that he also has an abundance of knowledge on. Yeah. And it's like, you know what? It really might happen. There's something to be said for being able to step up to the plate in the big situations. And when you have somebody like Hank Cherry that's done it back-to-back years, you think this is going to intimidate Hank Cherry? Absolutely not. There's no chance. He's going to be able to approach the classic, understand it. Right. I mean, it's just crazy to think that, as much as you want to tell yourself in the back of your mind, it's probably not going to happen 3 years in a row. It certainly sets up to be, an event that he could possibly do it.
And it wasn't like Hank Cherry just like under the radar for a defending classic champ. And then all of a sudden I'm going to jump up on the final day and catch a bag. And you're like, oops, I won again. He has led almost all of the days. He's led 3 at Gunnersville. He led 2 at the Classic this past year at Ray Roberts. He's led 5 of the last 6 Classic days, and he's going to a place that he got a top 10 in the elite event in 2019 there. I mean, and it's setting up to it. Dude, if we want to say, oh, it's going to be dirty in the backs of the creeks and warmer water, no shot Hank Cherry. He used a chatterbait to the best of them. He used a swim jig to the best of them. He could flip docks with the best of them. And boy, if he gets that jerk bait in some ditches, I mean, he could be the quickest limit out of the bunch. And so no pressure on him at all. I mean, his bank account says we're chill. I mean, we're just hanging out. Like, it's all good. But man, what would that, I mean, this is a tough classic field. We set the buckets for fantasy fishing. I had to help figure out our top 10 cameras on who will cover day 1. I mean, it's hard to pick them. We got a good 25 guys who could win it. And I'm not saying out of the 55 that 30 can't, but I'm just going to go ahead and say, if you're the college champion, if you're the Opens champion, if you're the nation champion, you're going to have to, you're the nation participants, you're going to have to show us, because it's been won by an Elite Series angler basically every single year, dating back to, when Kirchhoff did it. I mean, I haven't seen an Opens winner other than somebody's going to claim, Chris Bowes told me that he claims Randy Howell because Randy wasn't in the Classic. He won an Open, and then he got in the Classic and he wins. He was an Elite Pro, but yes, he qualified via the Opens. We can't list him down as an Opens Pro winner, but if you think about it, you really have to beat not only the lake, you got to beat the guys who know how to win that event.
Yeah, no, that's a tall mountain to climb if you're one of the, the people you're talking about. I mean, that's certainly not going to be an easy task. You look at the Classic field, and like you mentioned, when we were setting the fantasy fishing buckets, you get down to like bucket D, and you'd put somebody in bucket D, and you'd think, how is this guy in bucket D? There's no way he's not higher than that. And then you look at the guys above, in bucket C, bucket B, bucket A, and you understand why, because it is an absolutely monstrous field fishing the Classic this year.
Yeah, I'm very excited about that. The only thing that has me on my antsy. I'm a little bit antsy, unsure if I'm gonna have to leave early and fly back. If my wife's gonna have this baby when I'm gone, the 1 week I leave, if she's gonna have this baby, but I'd expect the baby to hold out, unless it's a crazy dramatic Bassmaster Live and she's watching it and goes into labor because it's so exciting. I have no idea, but I will say Hartwell's going to be a good one. Anderson, South Carolina is always a great host, right there with Neil Paul and that whole crew at Lake Hartwell. Greenville, it's a great. We know how to set up a classic there, so the fans who show up, it's going to be great. Excited about that, and yeah, I mean, I'm tired. We had 2 Elite Series events and we've been trucking with content, but we're going to be rolling out our St. John's post content about John Cruz's win and whatnot this week before the Classic. We'll probably get to the Harris Chain a little bit after the Classic. They'll probably come out the same week, the Classic content and Harris Chain. We're going to hit that hard, but yeah. Anything else you have about Hartwell? I'm excited. People say we've gone there a whole bunch. I believe this is the 4th trip in the last 15 years for the Classic. I know we've done 3 since 2015, so 3 out of the last 8 classics, I guess. But it's been different every single time. It's been the coldest classic. We had the last one get won on 5 different baits because they had to adjust every day. We saw docks come into play, and the time before the lake was 30 feet low in 08. So we always get something a little different at Hartwell.
No, and that's the thing is Lake Hartwell is such a great tournament lake for that exact reason. There's so many different things you can do, so many different variables. It allows anglers to do just a lot of different things, which makes it a fantastic tournament lake. And then like you mentioned, you add that into the fact that the Anderson Greenville area, I mean, it's an awesome area. I expect that, the crowds to be big, the expo to be huge. It's going to be a really good classic, and I'm looking forward to it because this is the first classic I've actually got to go to at Hartwell. So I've really been looking forward to it big time.
When was that one?
What was that?
Did you say this was the first place that you went to a classic?
No. This is the first time I've been to one in Greenville.
This is your first time. Okay.
Yeah. So of all the classics that have been in Hartwell, I haven't gone to any of them. So I'm looking forward to finally seeing it. Got to spend some time over there, so I'm really looking forward to the classic there.
You know all the spots to eat at, and I'll be leaning on you for that because I said, Sarah, what am I going to do? I'm not going to have my chauffeur there helping me when I get done with live, taking me to dinner while I work. So you're going to have to be my date for the week if that's cool.
Yeah, we'll have to get some information from photographer Dalton Tumblin and videographer Logan Crumley, being from the area. They're definitely going to have some insight on the food, and we actually already talked a little bit about that this last week. So I'll definitely have some spots lined out by the time the tournament starts.
Good deal. Well, thank you guys for joining us on this episode of the Inside Bassmaster Podcast. This was wrapping up the Harris Chain. Got to talk with Buddy Gross. Really enjoyed his perspective. Such a cool story about, I got very little money. If I'm going to do it, it might as well be when I get laid off from my job, and boom, couple time winner there. Transitions over to the Elite Series, wins Eufaula and wins Harris Chain. And you could tell how grateful he is to be a professional fisherman. We need to get him a little better at pour mouth in his practice because we got to just stop believing that. But to see him do it the way he likes to fish is very cool. I wonder how he transitions that into Hartwell. I said that John Cruz was one of the shortest lived elite winners because we rolled into a back-to-back. He might be one of the shortest because they're going to be asking him all about classic prep because of this. But Friday's going to come up quick. Unofficial practice starts then. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Wednesday, we have practice start officially. I'll be riding with Jason Christie most likely on that practice day, which will be fun. We'll have guys out with photographers. Obviously, you guys will be covering the whole deal on the water. Davey Height will be able to ride around, I believe, with Brandon Cobb, and Robbie Floyd with Hank Cherry. So we'll have a couple of the main names. We'll see how their final day of practice goes. But Kyle, appreciate you joining me. Any last thoughts before we transition off of here? Next time we talk, we'll be picking our fantasy picks, and I better do like I did at the Harris Chain where my drain the lake was, perfect. But my Rapala team is still, I gotta get in a different mindset for that.
Now I'm really looking forward to the classic. It's nearly impossible as a fishing fan to not be excited for the classic. Like you mentioned earlier, I'm a little tired for sure of these back-to-backs, but it's easy to keep going when you know the classic is coming up so short, it's in such a short amount of time. So I'm really looking forward to it. And like you said, next time we're on here, we'll go over some fantasy picks.
Awesome, Kyle. Thank you guys for joining us on this episode, and be sure to look forward to the next one coming up next week.